like to tell you that again, I'm honored to be here. I was honored to be asked to do this. This session is about how to make your executive core qualifications real. This is me and how to reach me. And in addition to the video or recording, you will also have access to a slide deck, if you will. This is a little bit about my background. I have been in business for 46 years. I've had the privilege of working with just about every industry, both in the public and in the private sector. But anyway, this is about your executive core qualifications. I call them your big five, if you will. And I've had the opportunity to see what other organizations have done to articulate or document what it is that they expect of their executive leaders. And I will tell you, I think yours are car above. Now, I had not, when on my rehearsal last Sunday, I was told that you recently did a survey on this. And there was some question or some doubt about how good these really are. Well, I would like to distinguish between how they're expressed, how they're written, articulated, versus how they're executed. And by the way, this session is about how to execute. And that's probably the area where there's opportunity for improvement. What I would like to also talk about here is that as I studied these, they're not unique and separate. They're sort of like warm jello. They kind of blend and run together. For example, creativity and innovation and entrepreneurship are very closely related. Similarly, vision, strategic thinking, leveraging diversity, and political savvy, they go glove in glove. They're very much intertwined. Now let's talk about team building, developing others, human capital management. They're all out of the same cloth. They're in different places, but they're not done independently. And then you have conflict management and problem solving. Those are just some quick examples that I was able to see in my preparing this, where your core qualifications are actually highly interdependent and affect one another, if you will. To get started, I'd like to try my first poll, if we could. I'd like to know from you as an audience, which one of these you want to know more about? Would you please pull up the poll? Well, from what I can see here, it looks like business acumen is the winner. I found that interesting because that's the one that gave me the greatest grief as I was studying this, because I'm not sure I want you to be like businesses. So we'll talk about that when we get into the actual competencies within that core qualification. The next one up is leading change and building coalitions. We'll be talking about all, but this is very helpful and insightful for me. Thank you very much. But anyway, when I was asked to speak about this and how to make your core qualifications real, that I said, why were they created? I started out with, so what was the driver behind all of this? And I went back to your literature, and according to the Office of Personnel Management, it was because you're expected to drive a federal corporate culture that drives the results, serves customers, builds successful teams and coalitions. I mean, this is very good. This is politically correct kind of stuff to say. This is, of course, what you're all about. And there should be nothing new here. So what's changed? What's different? And this is really where the, if you will, the issue is. The point is, you've always been effective in the past, but the world has changed. It's much more complex than ever before. You are internally, you're a very complex social, economic, and political system, and you're more visible. By the way, Google knows everything. Okay, so whatever you do, you can't hide it. So you're under greater public scrutiny, if you will, what's going on. So the world of work, we're starting to realize that we are not an island. It used to be that what you did, nobody knew about it. Now it's completely public, okay? We know what's going on everywhere around the world, and they know what we're doing. Then the work itself is far more complex than before, mostly because it's being digitized. Our reliance on technology is actually taking over our lives in many ways. And then let's look at the people. The workforce is much more diverse than ever before. And it's diverse on a lot of levels in terms of skills, in terms of background, in terms of experience, in terms of education. And I will talk to each of these in greater detail as we go through it, okay? So how do we make them real? That's what I'm supposed to talk about. What will it take to make the executive core qualifications real. Now, real by that I mean is just they manifest. They're how we really live. It's what we do day in, day out. They're integrated into our actual behaviors, our decisions, our guides. That's what's real. They're not some academic thing. They're not the 3-ring binder on the shelf or the file folder in the shared drive, okay? So the real question is, what are you going to do to make them real? You see, this is not about somebody else coming in and making them real. This is about you making them real. I'll kind of tell you a sort of sad story. I've had the same doctor for 30 years. And for 30 years, he's told me I need to lose 30 pounds. One could say I need to fire him as a doctor because he's been totally unsuccessful. I haven't lost any weight at all. Now, as silly as that is, that's what this is about. I can't lose weight until I make some decisions and change my behaviors. The ECQs are only real when you change your behaviors. Now, that senior executive service group, they represent about 6% of your total population, and they are outside the norm on a lot of levels. Their profile, they don't look like their larger workforce. Their responsibilities are more unique, and the skills required to do the work are more great. They have to have separate kinds of experience, education, and skills. And part of these ECQs is growing people into their position, readying, if you will. It's called bench strength. It's called succession planning. It's called talent management, but it's taking the people below them and behind them and bringing them up so that they are able to fulfill the jobs, be able to execute if you will, ECQs, all right? Now, I'm not going to bore you with this, go through this in detail, but there was some serious research done by Jelinas and James on why major initiatives, like what you're seeing in terms of your core qualifications, why do initiatives like this fail? I mean, they become the fad, we pay attention to them, and then 6 months later, you can't find them, and a year later, nobody even remembers them. And they've did some very serious and profound research on why initiatives like this do not fail. I'm not going to go through the 18, but I am going to focus on the critical ones for us. And that starts out, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Or what's the opportunity you're trying to seize? And how do you have evidence that you even have a problem? I mean, how do you even know that this is going on? And the answers to these questions are going to be unique for each agency, department, function, group. Okay, now the Office of Personnel Management has come up with a general statement about the need for a new culture that drives results, the need for greater diversity. They've built their larger mandate, if you will, but it must be operationalized for each and separate agency, department, and function. And then the critical mass. This is a key part to making it real. And I thought I'd take a moment and deal with that. The critical mass is in your group. It's 51% of you are in agreement, in consensus on what you're trying to do. What are the new behaviors that you want to see? How committed you are. So it's called that tipping point. So mathematically, it's 51%, but it's more importantly, it's your key influencers and who's on board with you. For example, you can take your own group and you can put them in simple quads. You can look at those that everybody respects, their voice carries some weight, and they are in agreement. And then you have those who also have a lot of power, but they're saying, wait a minute, why do we need to change? Everything worked in the past. What's the big problem? So their support is questionable. And then you have those who are on your team, but they don't really carry a lot of clout. Nobody really pays attention to them. And then you have that fourth group that they're kind of around, but nobody pays any attention to them. So what does this mean? The critical mass. Is it this? Is it this? Only you know. It's when you enroll enough of the people so that when you say, these are the new behaviors we want to, these are the new goals we have set. This is how the culture that we want, that this group is actually in agreement and consensus. Will you actually have the critical mass and be able to call it off? Okay. So the next part of this, where are you today? And you have to have a discussion. What are we going to use as our metrics? When we talk about business acumen, okay, well, how do we measure that for us? And what are the leading indicators? And the answers are going to be unique, again, for each agency, department, function, group. But you still have to verbalize it, and you need to nail it down. Otherwise, you don't know. So let's talk about my weight. See, I don't care about weight. I care about health, which makes my doctor very mad because my numbers are wonderful. My blood pressure is great. Everything else. And he gets so mad at me because since I'm fat, I should be sick, but I'm not. Okay. But so what's the baseline and what are the leading indicators? Here's another question. Who really owns this problem? Who benefits from things staying the same? Every time we are where we are, somebody is benefiting from it. So until we identify them and understand what they're getting out of the status quo, we cannot move them. And it's very important that they feel heard, not that you badger them and bully them. They have to genuinely feel heard and their opinions respected. That's the first step for them letting go and moving on. And who benefits? Okay. And what do we have to learn to really fix this problem? Okay. Finally, if you really want this to be real, it has to become, you have to give it attention. It has to be a standing item on the agenda. You have a neighbor, he was the head of the Dulles and Reagan National Airports, the Metropolitan Washington Airport Authority. And they were adopting the balanced scorecard. And he did something that his direct reports were unprepared for. He made the discussion a standing item on the agenda. Now, as you might imagine, at an airport, we always discuss safety and we discuss, monies and things like that. But the balanced scorecard suddenly was elevated to that. So if you want these core qualifications really considered, you don't talk about them once a year. You don't talk about them at the annual review. You make them part of your standing agenda. How are we doing it? What's the story we're telling? What's really going on? Okay. So I have this little model for you to help you remember. We have to give direction, measurement, self-regulation, and attention. And this is what this is about. So goals. I'm going to talk, you'll see this coming throughout every time I talk about each one of your executive core qualifications. So first of all, we have the goals. And those, again, will be unique for each agency, department, and function. Who's your critical mass? Who do we have to get on board? Who do we have to engage and enroll if we really want these behaviors to reflect our true culture? What's our baseline? How do we know if we don't have a baseline, we don't know if we're progressing? And what are we going to monitor says that we're on track? Pilots are kind of interesting. They don't get in a plane and then fly it for a couple of hours and hope they end up at the right runway or the right airport. Throughout their flight, they are getting feedback. They're being told how fast they're going, how high they're going, all of which increases the odds that they get to the right airport with sufficient fuel and land safely. So we need to do the same thing. We have to build our own systems in so that we know we're on track. That's part of our own personal accountability. And again, we have to put it on the agenda. We really have to put it on the agenda. It has to be serious, not something you discuss only when it's convenient. So let's go through these one by one. We will take a break, by the way, but let's go through these one by one and see if I can make this more real for you. Now, I think, if my memory has, about 38% of you were interested in leading change, okay? What do I mean by leading change? Well, you start out saying it's the strategy. And by the way, you'll see this word strategy. It shows up all over. It's a strategic change. It's being able to look within and outside. That's that external perspective. It's having a plan, but the plan is built with awareness of what's going on outside and inside your own organization. It's not a plan built on a wish list and a hope. It's a plan built on real data about what's going on in your world. Then you have to have a vision. If you don't know where you're going, you'll go somewhere, but it may not be a very good place. So you have to say, what really is it we're trying to accomplish? And then you have execution. I'm sorry, I have to change the way I eat. I have to decide to exercise. It's the same thing. You have to put time and energy into the effort. And this reminds me of a story that Ron Zemke told. Ron was the founder of Lakewood Publications. You might know it as Training Magazine or Training, the big annual training conferences. And he said, look, if you want to get somewhere, you have to have an eye on the future and you have to have an eye on today. And his example was that if you had a herd of cows and you wanted to get them to the barn, you better have one eye on the barn and one eye on the cows. Because if you only look to the barn, you'll get there, but the cows won't be with you. And if you only look at the cows, you'll get somewhere, but it won't be the barn. So this leading change is very much, you have to have a vision. Where do you want to go? But you have to be grounded in the reality of where you are today. And then your interest is in harnessing energy to make sure everything is moving toward that goal, that ultimate vision that you have. And this requires some creativity and innovation. Creativity is kind of interesting. It's really, it's associated with the arts, performing arts, graphic arts, the visual arts. But in the sense of running an organization as complex as yours, it's really the willingness to challenge assumptions, to make it an effort to look at things in a slightly new way, okay? It's being open to testing things out. We'll get into risk management in a little bit, but it really is the willingness to revisit, even when things are going well. Is there a way we can do better? What are the assumptions we're working from that way? So that brings us to, you have to have some external awareness. We have seen real examples in this country where senior executives were so comfortable, they closed the blinds, they closed the windows, and they refused to look outside. Our automotive industry was blindsided with what Japan did in how it built cars. Our steel industry was not prepared for what Japan's innovation, its cold technology in making steel. Our current retailers, our big stores, our traditional stores, all of which I love. I'm a big Sears lover, okay? They have chosen not to pay attention to what's going on in the marketplace, and their stores are closing. Oh, what about those taxi drivers, Uber and Lyft? They completely changed the rules, okay? So we have to be sensitive and aware. It's not what we want to be going on outside. It's what really is going on outside. And that means we have to be somewhat flexible. And I will tell you, this is hard. I get really angry, particularly with all the technology changes, which I'll speak to in a bit. Can't we just stop fixing things? I finally learn it and you go make something new. But we have to be able and be willing to adapt to the new things that are going on. But we also have to be critical consumers. Just because it's there doesn't mean we have to take it. So we have to ask, is that really wise? Is that really the best use of our time? Is that the best use of our resources? So this resilience really means, this is also personal resilience. It's having people around you that support you. But it's also, you're being able to handle resistance. And I will say, to challenge change, not just be driven and sucked into it, but ask hard questions. Is this change right for us? And if so, how do we make it happen? Okay. So that's our strategic thinking. And again, this word strategy shows up throughout your ECQs. So the point is, strategic thinking has to do with, all right, this is a long-term interest. You don't jump on the bandwagon because it's there. You ask critical questions. Is that in our best interest? What do we have to give up? How does that impact that? Is it time to let go? Maybe we should change, okay? And with that, we have your vision again. Where do you want to go? And I will tell you, this is hard. Building a vision for us is not an easy thing. And part of it can't be built by ourselves. We have to pull our team into helping us construct this vision. I've actually set aside much of December to do just this for my own company. I've been in business for 46, 47 years. Maybe it's time to revisit who I am and what I'm about. What is it I want for the future, right? So this is an overview of leading change. Again, I think 38% of you were interested in this. And to help you with this, is gave you a little scale about compliance and innovation. Now, this is just between you and me, okay? There is this image of government that you have a lot of standard operating procedures. And by the way, in preparation, I tried finding out just how many you have, and it's too big a number. I also want you to know those are good things. If you didn't have standard operating procedures, you would have chaos. So it's not like giving up compliance or compliance is bad. It's about asking the question, is this still serving our needs? Think of it as a set of tools, okay? Every now and then, your tools need to be oiled, they need to be sharpened. Sometimes they need to be thrown away and replaced. So the leadership piece here, the leading change, is asking the question about what are we doing? Why are we doing? Does it still serve our needs? Is it time to change? Okay. So you need to ask yourself with your team, where are you now? Where are we on this scale? Where do we want to be? And how are we going to make the change? What are we going to do to make this happen? Okay. So coming back to my little diamond piece here, we have here, what are your real goals for leading change? What are the feedback? Who do you have to get on board? How do we give it the attention that it needs? All right. So let's now go to leading people. This is one that you had less interest in, so we'll try to make this less painful for you. But this has to do with leading people, has to do with getting that herd of cows all focused in the same direction, but at the same time respecting those cows and understanding what they bring to the party. It is fostering development. It is facilitating cooperation. It is constructive. It's not no conflict, everybody be kissy poo and nice. No, it really says conflict is healthy, but it's doing it in a constructive way. So this brings me to conflict management. One of the clients I have the privilege of working with is Google. It's fascinating. And I've been to their numerous offices and seen numerous teams, and I've watched them disagree. It's fascinating. They do it in an elegant way. First of all, they note they have a different perspective. They hear out everybody and make them feel heard, that their position is felt, okay, and recognized and respected. And they resolve and they come to consensus. I saw that over and over again. We need to take lessons from those people, okay? But it's conflict management is not polarizing, taking votes and pushing. No, it's really hearing out all those opinions and positions, respecting them. That makes it easier for people to let go. And then coming to something that we can all agree on and move forward with. And this brings me to diversity. My dad worked in the civil service. He was in petroleum logistics for the Air Force for World War II, Korea and Nam. And he said to me, he said, look, when you go into a room, if you don't see a brown suit in the room, it's an unhealthy group. Now, please understand at this time, there were only men in the room, and they all wore navy suits or black suits. They all wore white shirts, plain ties, dark shoes, dark socks. It was the oddball whose jacket didn't match his pants, dared to wear white socks, penny loafers, Hawaiian tie, pink shirt. But that's what my dad looked for, because, by the way, he was the brown suit. But he said, if we are all alike, there is no room for diversity of thought. And this group is not healthy. And I just leave that to you. So diversity is more than just everybody looking different. It really is honoring and recognizing multiple perspectives and talents, giving value to them and letting them surface so that the collective is actually stronger than the individual. So this brings us to developing others. Developing can certainly be done. By the way, ISPI, I'd like you to join them for this, and they're good. But developing others is not just formal training. That's a key part. But it's also giving people opportunity to serve on committees, projects, giving them feedback, debriefing them after they do something. So it's a learning opportunity. It's not just delegating development to the training group. It's saying we will all be responsible for growing and learning, even ourselves, okay? And this brings us to team building. It's a recognition. By the way, I'm going to come back to Google for a minute. The other observation I had is that whenever all those people that came in the room, they all knew they were invited because they were smart. And they knew everybody else was invited because they were smart. And they knew that by working together, the collective ideas and outputs would be greater than what any one of them could do individually. So there was a genuine buy-in to the need for collaboration and team building. And that's what we mean by making that really work, okay? So that's leading people, and this is your pipeline. So if we think of the SES as that 2 or 3 standard deviations outside above the norm, then we have the next is their pipeline, but you also have people external to the government services, part of your pipeline. So why do we care? Work ain't what it used to be. If it can be automated, it will be automated. How work is executed is different, even in the trades. My roofers that I work with have drones going around measuring areas anymore. They have to work with high-end chemicals. The materials they put on your roof are new composites that didn't exist before, okay? So work itself is more sophisticated than ever, and it requires workers to be digitally literate as never before. They have to have skill in communication. Now, it's easy to talk to people where you have a shared background, same value set, Thanksgiving is the same for all of you, but it's harder when you have a diverse group. You come in with different cultures, different mores. By the way, I'm kind of known for cutting through the noise, being straight on. And I have to be sensitive because some of the people I communicate with, I need to spend some time up front saying, how are you doing? Is life okay? Those are things that are hard for me to do because I just want to go, this is the agenda, let's move. And I've had to learn that that's not appropriate. And it actually doesn't bring people on board, nor do they feel valued when I do that. So skill in communication is all about how we talk, email, whatever we're doing. And then that critical thinking comes back again, strategic thinking, problem solving. It's being able to question what are the facts. So how do we know that? What's going on? It's if we do that, what's the risk? What's not being told to me that I need to consider? Is asking hard questions. And then that come back to that innovation. Okay, if you want to have change, you have to see new opportunities, you have to be willing to take risks, things like that. So part of this leading people has to do with that workforce behind us. There's question whether or not they have what's needed to do the work in front of them. Right now, our data shows that young people coming out of our school system, their literacy level, we're not a winner in the world. Science and math, we're way behind other nations. So what's that mean? Now I'm going to pause for a moment and talk about literacy. Literacy is not intelligence. I'll give you an example. I told you my dad worked with this, he was in petroleum logistics for the Air Force. He was a civilian. I believe he was a GS-12. He could never go any further because, he never finished high school. He didn't even finish the 10th grade. He was a mathematical genius who was illiterate in math because he had never studied math. If you ever had the opportunity to see the movie Hidden Figures, and they had that big wall of all of the formulas, my dad couldn't read that because he was never trained in that, but he could solve the problems. All of his problems were word problems. When it came to him, it came in, the bad guys are here, the ship is there. How close does the ship have to be before the planes can take off and have enough fuel to get back? And he could answer that question. His world didn't come to him in formulas. When he turned in his letter of resignation, 5 years notice, 5 PhDs in math were hired to replace him. I remember his coming home one day, and he's really glum. He was really down. I said, what's going on, Dad? He said, I called them bad names. My dad was a very gentle man, but he was illiterate, and he knew it. And then the opportunities of continuing ed did not exist for him. So understanding you have barriers in that workforce coming in. We have some real literacy challenges, and we have to bring literacy up if we want them to be effective. But don't confuse that with intelligence. Which brings me to this. 66.5 million workers in this country have cognitive disabilities. 3.5 are autism. Walgreens, by the way, I think is leading the pack in developing jobs to hire them, paying them competitive wages, and how they work with them. 1 in 3 have an arrest record. That doesn't mean they were found guilty. Only means that they were arrested. Only 20%, in some places only 10%, even know a foreign language. How can we work with the world if we insist that the world only speak English? Okay. And by the way, unwilling to travel. Due to the traumas of our young people coming out of the Middle East and serving in the services, when they come home, they don't want to go anywhere. They want to be safe. This is your workforce. As a result, we have a severe skills shortage. We don't have the people we need to be scientists, engineers, and medical personnel. We don't have the skilled tradespeople. So this competency, this core qualification of developing people is absolutely essential that we learn. So we're going to try another poll and hope this one works, okay? So how prepared are you to reduce the skills gap? We'd like to hear from you. A good 50% of you feel like you have some capability. That's good. There's a smaller group, not a lot. I would just tell you that developing others is going to be a real serious challenge. We're going to have to revisit the whole process of how we do that. It's going to be an interesting challenge for us, okay? Now I have removed and shut down the poll. Well, this one, the scale I gave you is not about compliance versus innovation. It's about less effective versus more effective. That way, and where you are. And you've already told me that some of you, 57% said you're pretty good, right? Some of you, small numbers, say you need help. Okay, where do you want to be? Where do you want to be? And how are you going to get there? Now, here's where, again, you're going to work with your colleagues. You're going to work with your team and say, okay, what's the baseline? What are we using as metrics? How do we know we're good? So not good, very good at developing others. What are we using? So what's our goal? What kind of change do we want to make? And how do we all get on board so that we have a shared vision? We're all committed to this, what's going on. And what are we going to track? And how are we going to monitor that we're on course? What's going to tell us what's going on? And how are we going to keep it on the agenda? Something like that, okay? And with that, okay, why don't we we're going to see you in 5, and we will deal with the others. Will go a little bit faster, but we'll see how that goes, all right? Thank you. See you in 5.
Hi, Judy. I think we're good to go.
We are good to go.
Yeah. And
I had the opportunity to check the chat, and one of them has to do with groupthink, and the other one has to do, we can't have harmony if we're all singing the same note. I thought those were elegantly said. The part of avoiding groupthink has to do with who you invite. You must tolerate differences. This is this ability to have constructive resolution of differences. But if you only invite the people who are going to sing your same song or same note, if you only invite people, in other words, if you exclude people who bring diverse views, you will have groupthink. That's absolutely true. That's how that works. Okay, so let's see what we can do here. See how that goes. Hey, this was working. And results driven is basically it's the ability, what are the results? But again, we have to be in agreement on what it is, where we want to go and what we want to accomplish. Otherwise, we might get someplace and not like where we end up. Okay. And so it does mean making decisions. And sometimes you make those decisions without all the information. You have to make your best guess and go for that, which means you have to have safety nets in place in case things change. So this comes down to accountability. Going back to my bad example about losing weight, I keep blaming my doctor for my not losing weight. The truth of the matter is I'm responsible for it. I just don't want to own up to it. Well, if we're talking about leading change and leading people, and we're talking about business results and all the others, we have to step up to the table. We have to look ourselves in the mirror and be very frank. And we as a team have to be committed to what it is that we're doing. We have to accept responsibility for mistakes, okay? By the way, there is a company here that's known for its innovation. And every time it doesn't work the way they want it to, there is no shame or blame. The first question is, What did we learn? What didn't we see we should have? How could we caught that faster? It's all about learning. In many organizations, it's all about shame and blame. Okay. So let's talk about customer service. Customer service, it's not just being nice and always being obedient. I've been a consultant for a long time. And sometimes I have to say to my clients, my customers, no, that's not wise. So I have some due diligence and stewardship over what's going on. You have the same, but you have customers within your agency. You have customers across multi-agencies, and you have customers outside the government service, the federal bureaucracy altogether. And you have to, who are those customers? Which ones are we trying to serve? What is that really going to mean? And this comes back to decisiveness. What are we willing to step up to? When do we want to waffle? When do we want to stall? And when are we stalling as a way of avoiding our own accountability? Okay. And this brings me to the entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship, as I said earlier, fits with risk taking, it fits with innovation. These EQs are not separate and apart, they're not distinct, they're highly interrelated and interdependent. But when they want you in your agency to be entrepreneurial thinking, I think what they're saying is they want you to ask questions. They want you to challenge the status quo. They want you to pose alternatives. Be willing to be wrong and be willing to learn from that. That's your calculated risk. Okay. Problem solving. When you run up, it's an ownership. Okay, we didn't see it. We should have, but we didn't. We didn't. We misread that. We need to address it. So it means we have to look, is our intelligence about our world. This is that military word about intelligence, not about smart. It's about being in the know. Do we really know what our customers want? Do we really know what's really going on? How much confidence do we have? Now, ISPI had a conference, and they had a chief executive officer speak, and he spoke to this particularly about he didn't believe any of his people. He said, they're all telling me the truth, but it's their truth. It's not the whole truth. And he had learned to hear them and genuinely accept it, but then validate it other places. And you have to do the same thing. Problem solving is being data driven, but also questioning the validity of the data, looking for data that correlates in what it's doing. And then we come back to technical credibility. And this goes back to one of my dad's stories again. He came home one day and he had a smile on his face. I said, what happened? He said, well, I got a new boss. I said, well, that's wonderful. He said, yeah, he doesn't know anything about what I do. Ooh. So he will leave me alone. So I thought that was kind of an interesting way of thinking about it, because we have here, as part of your core qualification, is that they want you to have technical credibility. That doesn't mean you're competing with your people on technical know-how. It means you know enough about what they need to be successful, that you fight, that they have the resources they need, the information they need, the support they need to achieve what you want and need as an agency. So credibility really is that you have to appreciate their technical expertise and ask questions, not to compete with them, but ask questions about what do they need to be successful and validate that, okay? So ISPI has a model which might help you in terms of having people perform effectively. And they look at the world, and they look at the workplace, and they look at the work and the workforce. And I've decided to look just at the workplace here for you. And this kind of makes sense. It really means leadership's aligned. It's very damaging when the senior leaders are in argument, not in agreement, divisive. So if you really want an effective organization, want to be drive for results, senior management needs to work through its own conflict. It needs to come to consensus. It needs to decide what it can be unified on. And with that, it needs to say, what's the infrastructure we need to give our people so that they can be effective in what they're doing? That's defining roles and relationships, and it's also being willing to learn. Then let's look at the work. We need to ask ourselves, are we doing the work we should be doing? It was the work we did in the past. It was work that was good. Is it still good? Because change, we sometimes keep doing stuff the way we've always done it without revisiting, is that what we need to do? Sometimes work can be replaced. It can be redesigned. It can be integrated. It can be removed. We don't know. But the leadership part of driving results is asking, having your group ask those hard questions. Are we doing the work that needs to be done? And are we doing that work in a way that really adds benefit? And then our people. Do we have the right people on the team? This comes back to that group think. If you only invite the people you like, you'll have group think. Do we have the right people? Do they have the right skill sets? Are we have them in the right roles? Are we asking them to do the right things? So this is where the leadership of people and driving results all come together. Okay, so coming back to here, this has to do with risk. My scale here is risk aversive versus risk tolerant. Being risk aversive, not willing to take any risks, is very dangerous because the world will drive you. You then are the end of the dog's tail, if you will. You're being jerked around. You need to be somewhere in the middle here if you really want to have some effect over your own future. But it's only you can say, where are you? Where are we? Where do we want to be? And how are we going to get there? So when we talk about driving for results, what are the results we really want? What are we using as data that tells us where we are? And what's going to continue to tell us over time that we're going in the right direction? What feedback do we have to build? Who do we have to get on board? Critical mass. Who needs to be on? Who is resisting? How can we honor and hear them? Maybe they have something we need to pay attention to. Maybe we need to replace them. Those are the hard, decisive questions. And how do we keep this on our agenda so we know what we're doing? So this is the one that, this EQ is the one I think had the highest wanting to know more about. I found it interesting again about business acumen because there's a lot of businesses out there you do not want to emulate. They're not particularly wise or smart. So when I hear about this, what does that really mean? And your Office of Personnel Management defined this as human financial information resources. It's managing those strategically. That's that big strategy word again. Okay. So it's you probably already know this. You know how your money flows. You know where it comes from. You know how much you're dependent on Congress. You know where it's going, what's going. But you have to have a deep understanding of that and ask again, is that a wise use of money? Is the money going where it should go? Do we have the right proportions? Is this the same old? Or do we really need to revisit that? That's the strategic management of financial assets. Same thing with human capital. Going back, like I said before, do we have the right people in the right chairs? Some people are the right people on the bus. I think that's a proven analogy. And if we do we have we stepped up to really enable them to excel? Or do we hamper them with out-of-date rules, standard operating procedures that are long since past their prime? Do we have technologies that interfere rather than, do we have structures, team structures, project structures that really do not enable people to excel? That's the management of our human capital. And then technology. Oh, this is one. I am so tired of technological advances, but guess what? They're going to keep coming and they're going to be coming faster and faster. But somebody has to say, is it wise? Do we need it? How does it help? Is the disruption it causes worth the grief? So that's where we talk about managing this business acumen. It's hard. It's just not going along with the wave. It's really taking responsibility for maybe guiding and directing that wave. So this is what makes up business acumen. Again, we have the difference between service and growth. I put these on the same scale. I don't like service or growth. That's silly. You have service and growth. So the service, is it the level of service we need? Is it the speed of growth, the amount of growth we need? That to me is a better way of looking at it. Where are we? Where we want to be? How we're going to get there. So coming here, when we say we want to have business acumen, what are our goals around human capital management? What are our goals around managing our finances and technology? Who's on board? Who's going to support us at critical mass? Where are we today? Where do we want to be? How do we know we're on course? And see, I talked about these. You have to own this. You are the one that's making this real. I can't do it for you. I'm just trying to give you tools to have better conversations. And our last one's coalitions, okay? We started out talking about how interdependent the world is. Our food supply chain is global. Our materials is global. Energy is global. Medical is global. All of this is global. We might like to think that we're in a little island, but we're not. We also are facing increasing social instability throughout the world. We can't ignore it. We can't deny it. We can turn out the lights, but it won't go away. We have to be willing to address this. So this does mean partnering. But I think you're good at partnering. The question is, do you have the right partners? Do you need to let new partners come in? This is that diversity. This is that staying really attuned with what's going on. If this is groupthink, if your partners are all people who love each other, like each other, think alike, sometimes we need to open the doors and really revisit, who are we in partnership with? Are they the wise ones for what's going on today? Do we need to open an opportunity for a new voice? Okay. Do we need to hear new things? Come down to political savvy. And I'm going to hang here with this a little bit. It wasn't said, but I'm from Chicago. Okay. Now, Illinois has the reputation of having more governors in prison than probably any other state. I think we're way ahead of the group here. Okay.
Oh, no.
I got a good giggle on that. Yeah. So politics, when you associate Chicago and politics, it has a lot of ugly connotations. And that's because most people, when they hear the word politics, they do not have a positive thought. But yet, political savvy, with the people who do it right, you never call them political. You call them, they get things done. So we're talking about you're having political savvy. You need to know how to use influence, how to build, create, strengthen, and use influence constructively. Sidney Fine has done some really great research on this, and he calls a difference between constructive politics and destructive. We don't want destructive. That's political scheming, factioning. That's Chicago. You don't want that. I'm sorry, that's probably unkind. We do have a new mayor in Chicago who's doing a crackerjack job. I'm sorry. And under very difficult circumstances. But historically, that's Chicago, okay? Constructive politics is constructive wisdom. It's being prudent. It's hearing out. It's knowing your enemies, respecting them and engaging them and giving them a chance for a voice so that they can change sides. They can support you, okay? And so that political savvy is, you really have to know where the influence is in your own agency, department, and function. You need to know who calls the shots, and it's rarely or may not always be the boss. It may not be the GS level, okay? There's other reasons why people have influence, but you know who has influence because they have access to information, opportunity. People listen to them when they speak up. They may not say a lot, but when they speak up, they're heard. People pay attention to them. Okay. So I've given you another little tool here. It's by Richard Byrd. It's a personal power model and how to build your own personal influence. Now, some of this is within our control, and some of it isn't. Personal traits. I'm as tall as I am. I'm not going to get any taller. Some of us have military background. Some of us don't. Some of us went to one school, went to Yale or Harvard, and others didn't. Okay. So personal traits have to do with physical attributes. It has to do with historic past experience, school, education, soccer club, chess club, football team, things like that. And not all of us got a chance to do that. But where we do have control are personal confidence. Nothing else, get therapy and put a team around you. Interpersonal skills. We can actually study diplomacy, persuasion. We can study those. How about information? We can pay attention to who's in the know and look to build a relationship with them so that our information is more current, up to date, and accurate. Opportunity. Well, we can create opportunities for others by inviting them to the party, letting them sit in on meetings, asking them to participate on teams, but we have to coach them and give them feedback that's developmental. For ourselves, we create opportunities. We ask to be invited. When somebody asks who, we raise our hand. We create this opportunity. So this little test goes, each thing gets 3 points. That means you have a maximum of 27 points. And Richard Byrd said, the closer you are to 27 points, easier for you to act on your own, easier for you to, you can have confidence that you'll get access information and people will defer to you. The lower you are, shut up and be quiet because they're going to run all over you. You don't have anything. Most of us are in the middle. So we can ask ourselves, if I want people to consider my thoughts and ideas more seriously, if I want to be invited to more, what can I do to increase my own personal power without taking anything away from anyone else? Okay. So then we have influencing and negotiating. They're training, there's skills on that, labor organizers, whatever. How do you do that? That's a whole art form. But we have to, somebody has to, the goal here is the coalition. The goal here is not annihilation. The goal here is cooperation. How can we work together? So I said the Google gang, they know everybody's invited because they're smart. And they also know that their collective thoughts will be greater than what any one of them individually can do. So that's what that's what building coalitions is all about. Now we've got 2 more polls here. We're going to cross our fingers. How would you rate your level of influence? Okay, let's hear from you. For those of you who say you need a lot of improvement or something, I would encourage you to look at Richard Byrd and look at his little thing and say, what can I do? What's within my control? Okay. I can't change my age. I'm as old as I am. I'm not going to get any younger. But there are some things that are within my control. Very good. Very good. Okay. Let's see if this works. Ah, it worked. Glory be. Okay. Well, this comes down to the scale for this one has to do with how independent are you versus how interdependent are you, and how much can you go alone. I caution you, in today's world, there's very little we can do by ourselves. Okay. So where are you now? Do you have the coalition? Do you have the partnerships that you really want and need? Where do you want to be and how are you going to get there? Comes back to the same little model. And you ask yourself, okay, what is our goal in collaboration? Do the people that we work with, that we're interdependent, are they the right people? Are we serving them well? Are they serving us well? Is it time to revisit those relationships? The critical mass, who do you have to get on board? Because these are long-term friendships, long-term. We have to be careful. We have to respect them. Okay, how do we get that? What are we going to use as feedback? How do we keep attention on this? So with that, I'm now finished talking about the 5 ECQs. And based now on what I've shared and told you about them, we have another poll. Where would you rate yourself now in your strengths? Okay. Well, again, if you remember, we started out with what do you want to know more about. Business acumen was one with the highest rating, but this is also the one that you've rated yourself the lowest. So maybe we need to better understand what this human capital management, financial technology, maybe we need to pay attention what that really means. And is it important for us to improve our strength in this? See what happens. Leading people, very good. It's number 1. Being results driven, very good. So this is your position where you are. Okay. Have we ended our poll? You want to tell us what our final numbers are? Leading people was number 1. Okay. Very good. I just want to point out that business acumen, which is your number 1, the one you want to understand more about, was your highest rated one in the first poll. I also want to remind you that that is interdependent with leading change, leading people, being results driven. It's not in isolation. These are not one at the expense of others. Think warm Jell-O, it all blends together, okay? So I'm going to close that and see if our plan works. It does. So with that, I'm going to be on the wrap, and we're going to go into some conversation questions with you. I've tried to give you my understanding based on my homework about your 5 ECQs and what they mean. I've tried to give you a tool, a thought model here to help you feel more in control and how you can upgrade yourself and your skills and your team in your ability to reflect the 5 ECQs, okay? I'd like to point out that ISPI is a strong believer. It has how we think and what we do. We are really big on focusing on results. The systemic view is we make it a point to pay attention to what's going on in the world, the marketplace, the workplace, the workforce, and the work. And it means multi-visioned. And if we individually don't have it, we have team members who are responsible for doing that. We work always to add value, and we understand collaboration is critical. Partnership, we can't get anywhere alone. Our systematic process is discovery and validation. Get the facts, Jack, okay? Find out what's really going on. Get to the root cause. And when you come up with solutions, make sure they're feasible. You can actually have the resources to implement them, and then measure. Get your feedback, continuously learn, okay? And we'd also like to remind you, if you want to learn more, check out ISPI's webinars, its certifications, and what's going on. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to my American University partners and to facilitate anything in the chat that I haven't addressed, anything new, or any questions that the group might have.
Hi, Judy. Thank you so much. We don't have any questions at the moment per se, but we do have some interesting observations and comments. One from Carolina. One of the most interesting tactics I've heard was from an SES. He shared with his calendar with the entire organization, and anyone was welcome to request to attend any meeting with him. It was subject to reasonable constraints, number of people, sensitive subjects, etc. And then Bridget also shares, for those of us in support functions like public affairs, legislative affairs, etc., business acumen is hard because we often have little or no control over our budgets, small staffs, and limited interaction with IT, except on a basic office tech level. That makes this ECQ very difficult to come up with compelling examples.
Absolutely, it does. But I will tell you, this doesn't mean you're without influence. You can definitely establish yourself as having expertise in your field. You can make it a point to better understand your constituents' drivers. So what you want to know is that they will defer to you, they'll listen to you if you have ideas. And that's how you maybe can influence your own budgets. But you are right, in support systems, or support functions, this is difficult. But I will tell you that in some of my corporate world, some of the most powerful people are the secretaries and the security guards, because senior management knows that they know what's really going on, and they trust them for what I call the rumors to touch base on what's really going on, okay?
Thank you so much, Judy. And once again, everyone, please feel free to share any questions, thoughts, or observations in the chat box. If you'd like to speak directly, please raise your hands or let us know here and we will unmute you. And I guess it's just the one hand you'll be raising. Someone from iPad says, is there a recommended approach to discuss one's ECQs?
Well, I would sit down and look at your colleagues, your peers, your boss, and say, always start, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the opportunity we want to seize? And as we look at these, where do we think we are? And what's the data we're using? How do we know? So we might think we're hot dang, or maybe we think we're very weak, but we might be pretty good. But you have to agree on the data, the benchmarks, the metrics that you're going to use to judge yourself. And I think that's something that's done through conversations over time. It doesn't happen at one coffee. It happens over time as people get more aware, more insightful about what this is about. So I would start out by saying, and then say, which of these do we want to embrace first? And if you can look at the whole EQC, or you can look at the particular, I call them competencies within that, whether it be human capital management, whether it be innovation, entrepreneurship, you can look at that. I would recommend you put a couple of them together, which I did in the beginning, like innovation and entrepreneurship. Those are two that I remember that go together. And we talk about diversity, and team building, and conflict management kind of go together. So you might want to group them. I think it's too big to take them all on, but you can look at maybe some collection ones and say, where do we really stand here? Where are the opportunities for us to hone our skills and get better at this?
Thank you so much, Judy. We have another question here from Carolina. In a military civil joint organization, there's a level of turnover up and down the organizational chart every couple of years. It regularly results in reorgs, realignments, etc. When leaders move, visions change, how does the workforce maintain focus and a firm grasp on why what they do matters?
This is something that gives me real deep heartache. I work with the facility managers, and they tell me that 90% of the Fortune 100 reorganize every 2 years. Do you know what chaos that causes? They think they're getting innovation. They think that they're triggering, challenging. I disagree. I think what they're creating is chaos. And that tells me they're so rich they can withstand all the chaos. So I become very skeptical. But maybe that's because I'm old. I don't know. But part of this is if you're going to have that churn, that reorganization, whatever, that means there really needs to be a way to codify and curate your knowledge. Otherwise, everyone's always starting from ground zero. And that is very painful and very dangerous and very wasteful. So how do we curate, how do we capture the learnings of the previous group so that we're not starting over, but we're building on? And that means you have to have a culture that allows that. So I would tell you this is a real cultural issue that needs to be addressed. But I've just shared with you my bias. Okay, my bias is I don't think change for change's sake is always wise. And if you're going to go around changing, you better have a way of learning from what happened. And unfortunately, like we go brain dead and don't remember anything. So I just see a lot of waste and a lot of pain and a lot of good people being hurt for no reason at all.
Thank you so much, Judy. We have a few more. Let's see. Latara has a thought that she'd like to share. It's important to be ever learning, stay abreast of the world around me, how it impacts my work so I can think and act strategically. And Karen also shares that she found that recognizing the ECQs overlap with each other was very helpful.
Yeah, these are not discrete. And being good in one will make you good in the other. Work them together. Lay them all out on a piece of paper. And look, I have actually, you can't tell, but I've actually got them written out like this. And that's how I was drawing the relationships. That's how I was able to see that better. It felt redundant. I said, where is it redundant? And that helped me, gave me some insight. So I tell you to do the same. Okay.
Do we have anything else? We have a few minutes.
Well, I would like to say, if you're having any final thoughts here, I would like to say I was honored at the request of being able to join you. I do hope that my thoughts and tools are ways to give you opportunities to reflect and learn from this. I will say that I believe you're all capable, and you have to join hands with each other and trust, and you have to be willing to open doors, both for yourself and for others. And if we work together, we can make it work.
Thank you so much, Judy. Thank you. I think we have maybe Nancy Burns is going to come on and give us some remarks about ISPI.
We have a question about the impediment to trust.
Oh.
I would tell you one of our biggest impediments is our own mind reading, second guessing people rather than finding out. Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions and contributions. It's been a real pleasure. This has been such an amazing presentation. I think that Nancy Burns will come on and share some remarks as well. As a reminder, while we get Nancy on,
Do I need to stop sharing?
No, you don't need to stop sharing.
Okay.
We'll just let Nancy speak. But as a reminder for the group, this is being recorded, and the session recording will be shared with everyone in addition to the slide presentation. An email will go out to folks once the recording is posted on our YouTube channel. But in the meantime, I'll drop the YouTube channel again into the chat box so you can visit it and see the other sessions from this year's FEDTalks with ISPI. Nancy?
Well, thank you. And I just want to share a special thanks. Thank you, Judy, for your presentation, but a special thanks to American University's School of Public Affairs key executive leadership team. So Dr. Patrick Malone, Jennifer Tether, Laman Lee, and Brianne Dorsey. I really appreciate this whole program that you have shared with ISPI. A sneak preview, our ISPI Spring Conference will be the last week of April in 2021. And so we look forward to seeing all of you there if you would like to join us. And just again, thank you so much for this opportunity to work with American University. What a wonderful partnership. Thank you for all you've done.